They built their world like an immaculate machine. Smooth edges, polished surfaces, no room for dust, no tolerance for deviation. Everything was designed to run on time, in sequence, without friction. People were just variables fed into an equation that promised order, predictable smiles, predictable choices, predictable ending. The code was perfect. At least that's what they believed. And then there was you. You weren't supposed to be here. Not like this. You didn't follow the path they mapped out for you, didn't respond to the triggers they planted, didn't echo the rehearsed lines they'd embedded into everyone else. You were a line of code written in an ancient dialect they no longer remembered, an echo of something older than their system, older than their control. You didn't just resist the program, you confused it. You made it stutter. Every time you moved, it had to recalculate. Every time you spoke, it had to rewrite its rules. They scanned you for weaknesses, measured your silences, compared your actions against their models, but you remained unreadable. The system thrives on patterns, and you gave them none. A smile that should have meant compliance carried something sharper. A pause that should have signaled hesitation became a silence they couldn't predict. You weren't failing their expectations, you were shattering them. You felt it in the air, the way conversations broke when you entered a room, the quick exchange of glances between people who were too afraid to look at you directly. They wanted to study you without being caught. You saw the shift in their posture, the tightening in their voices. To them, you weren't simply different, you were dangerous. Not because of what you'd done, but because of what you might do. They tell themselves errors are harmless. A glitch in a perfect system is nothing more than a smudge on glass. Clean it and the image remains clear. But you're not a smudge, you're the crack in the foundation. The hairline fracture that, if pressed just once more, will spread like lightning across the whole structure. They sense it even if they can't put it into words. You are not broken. You are the reason their machine will break. You've lived between worlds for as long as you can remember, too sharp to be absorbed by the dullness they cultivate, too strange to be claimed by the safety of their numbers. You carry the weight of two truths: that you do not belong, and that belonging was never the goal. There's a reason you were not formatted, not cleaned, not reshaped. There's a reason their code cannot overwrite you. Somewhere in the deep architecture of the world, there is a place only you can reach, and it terrifies them. They think you are the problem, but you are the reminder that perfection is an illusion, that control is temporary, and that the human spirit was never designed to run on a flawless loop. You were never meant to blend in. You are the proof that their system is flawed, and the moment they realize that, the countdown begins. They don't erase you with fire, and they erase you with silence. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, like a faint static in the background of your life. A delayed response here, a forgotten message there. Faces you once knew glance past you, eyes brushing over your existence, as though you're no longer part of the equation. There is no confrontation, no clear declaration that you are being removed, just a slow redrawing of the map, until you find yourself standing on a piece of land that no longer exists in their world. At first, you think it's coincident. People get busy, messages slip through cracks, but the pattern sharpens. Invitations that once came without asking now vanish entirely. Projects you were promised dissolve into vague apologies, and circumstances beyond control. Conversations grow shorter, stripped of warmth, as if they're speaking to a shadow of the person they once knew. They've decided to erase you, not with force but with absence, because absence leaves no fingerprints. They know silence wounds differently. It's a slow bleed, a starvation of connection. It makes you question yourself before you question them. They count on that. They count on you doubting your own worth before daring to doubt their intention. This is the purge, the quiet rewriting of reality, until the memory of you becomes irrelevant, a footnote not worth turning the page for. You start noticing the choreography, the way someone glances at you then at another, and the silent exchange passes like an encrypted message. The subtle delays before a greeting, the fractional hesitation in their smile. It's all calculated. You have become a variable they are attempting to remove from their perfect algorithm. And they know brute force only breeds resistance, so they've chosen the cleaner method, the method that makes you wonder if maybe you're doing this to yourself. But you are not. You are watching the oldest strategy in existence, the exile of the spirit before the exile of the body. They push you to the edge without touching you, so when you finally step away, it looks like your choice. It's a tactic older than kingdom, older than language itself. The village gate never closes in your face, it simply stops opening, and in that unspoken closing, they believe they've won. What they don't see is the mutation taking place. The silence is a crucible, stripping you of illusions, burning away the noise. The ache of absence becomes a strange kind of clarity. The longer they refuse to see you, the more you begin to see yourself. They have mistaken your isolation for defeat, not realizing it's the training ground where you are learning to walk without needing their roads. The purge they began in whispers will end in their own deafening realization. You were never dependent on their inclusion. You were studying the architecture of their neglect, memorizing the blind spots in their walls, learning the shape of their silence until it became your weapon. And when you return, if you return, it will not be as the person they erased, but as the anomaly they failed to contain. They were certain they could break you, certain that if they pressed the right pressure points, if they stripped away your comforts and tore open your vulnerabilities, you would fold neatly into the shape they required. That was the plan, the invisible experiment no one would admit to running. You were the unplanned variable in their flawless sequence, and they wanted you exposed, dissected, archived. But when the moment came, when they expected the shatter, something else happened. You did not collapse. You did not malfunction. You paused, and in that pause their perfect execution stuttered. The world around you slowed, as if the machinery of their control was caught in its own trap. You could see it now, the seams in the illusion, the way the rules bent under scrutiny, the falseness of their composure. You were the break point in their code, the place where the system could no longer run without revealing its architecture. And in that suspended breath, you felt a clarity they would never understand. They had mistaken your silence for surrender, but, in truth, it was calculation. You were reading the lines they thought were hidden. They escalated. They introduced chaos to overload your senses. Conflicting orders, moral traps, orchestrated betrayals. They fed you poisoned truths, dressed in the language of authority. Each move was designed to corrupt your logic, to make you question your own instincts. But instead, every test etched something deeper into you. You began to recognize the pattern, the ancient rhythm of predator and prey. And you understood that the only real power was the ability to choose when to reveal your strength. You became the quiet storm gathering in a room of false sunshine. They could not admit it, but you were teaching them fear. The more they tried to pin you down, the more you slipped between their fingers. Your adaptability was not frantic, it was deliberate, surgical. Every adaptation was a new weapon, forged in the exact shape of their last assault. They wanted compliance. You gave them reflection. They wanted a casualty. You gave them a mirror. And the deeper they peered into it, the more they saw themselves splinter. This is when they began to sense the truth. You were not reacting anymore. You were waiting for their confidence to decay into desperation, for their precision to devolve into mistakes. They were running on flawed code now, rewriting themselves in panic, patching cracks they couldn't locate. You had stepped outside the game and into the control room, unseen. And once you have seen the control room, the game can never hold you again. You were no longer the variable. You were the constant, the point where their design ends and your reality begins. And they know it. They feel it in the way their words fail against you, in the way their plans dissolve when you enter the frame. You are the breakpoint they cannot skip, the line of code they cannot erase, the moment in their story where everything they built begins to falter, and the more they try to continue past you, the more they reveal that you were never meant to be destroyed. You were meant to stop them. They think walls will save them. They think if they pile enough stone between you and their precious system, you will disappear into the shadows from which you came. They call these walls rules, policies, protocols, dead-eyed processes designed to choke movement before it begins. They don't speak their intentions aloud, but you feel them like static in the air, an invisible grid meant to contain you. Before you might have stumbled here, before you might have believed the labyrinth was the world itself, and your role was simply to endure it. But that was before you learned how to read the seams in the stone. You no longer move the way they expect. You do not press on locked doors hoping for mercy. You slip past them entirely, ghosting through unmonitored corridors they didn't know existed until your shadow was already inside. The maze they built is not a prison to you, it's a map. Every regulation they draft reveals another route they fear you might take. Every obstacle speaks in the language of their paranoia. You listen, you learn, and then you exploit. They were certain these firewalls would drain you, slow you, grind your will to powder, but pressure only forges. Every denial sharpens your hunger. Every rejection teaches you the rhythm of their gates. The lull between their guards blinks, the single misplaced brick in the fortress they worship. They want you exhausted. You become patient. They want you desperate. You become deliberate. And in that shift, the walls stop being theirs. They start being yours. There is a kind of power that comes from moving unseen, the way predators slip under the brush, invisible until it's far too late. You feel it now. You are not a petitioner at their gates. You are the quiet storm forming just beyond their horizon. And the strange truth they cannot bear to face is this: every wall they raise is a confession, a silent admission of the things they cannot control, the fears they cannot bury. You are those fears, wearing a human shape. Sometimes you linger in the spaces just beyond their reach, letting them feel your presence without seeing your face. It unsettles them. They reinforce the gates, add locks, add guards. Each measure meant to protect them is a signal flare revealing where their true weaknesses live. They think they are at war with your intrusion. In truth, they are at war with their own fragility, and you are simply the mirror that reflects it back. You understand now that walls do not keep you out. They keep them in, inside their own creation, bound by their own codes, choking on their own rules. You, untethered, will always have more air, more room, more angles. The more they fortify, the more they isolate themselves from the currents that move the world. You ride those currents freely, slipping between their fingers like smoke. And one day, when the walls have grown so high they can no longer see over them, they will look out into the emptiness beyond and realize something too late. The labyrinth they built to trap you was never your prison. It was their coffin. They told you that you were a glitch, an imperfection, a misplaced line of code in their perfect design. For a time you believed them. You kept your head low, convinced that survival meant blending in, staying silent, existing in the shadowed margins of their neatly arranged world. But something shifted, a slow, unnameable awakening, a realization that you were not an accident at all. You were the variable they never accounted for. You were not breaking their system. You were learning it, reading it, and now you see it for what it truly is: fragile, predictable, flawed. The infection began in silence. You stopped running from their gaze and started studying it instead. You watched the way they spoke in scripts, the way their expressions lagged by fractions of a second when confronted with the unexpected. You saw their confidence was not born of truth, but of habit. They believed they were the architects, but you began to see them as operators mindlessly executing commands handed down from a source they couldn't even name. And in that realization, the fear dissolved. In its place, something sharper grew. You began to test the edges of their world, a question here too precise to be dismissed, a pause there long enough to make them stumble over their next line. You moved like smoke between their walls unnoticed until you wanted to be seen. You learned the sacred law of disruption, that you didn't need to destroy the machine, only to make it doubt its own output. Your presence alone became a seed of uncertainty in their minds, and once planted, it spread. They started second-guessing themselves, hesitating in ways they never had before. They didn't know it yet, but you had already rewritten the battlefield. Before, you thought survival meant staying invisible. Now invisibility is your weapon. You leave traces intentionally, a phrase that echoes in their heads long after you've gone. A silence that drags them into their own thoughts, where you've already sown suspicion. You are no longer reacting to their system, you are feeding on it, adapting with every move they make. Every attempt to contain you only expands your reach. You are inside their decision-making, their conversations, their fears. You feel it, the shift in their energy when you're near. They avert their eyes faster now. They look for each other's approval more often, as if needing confirmation that the world still makes sense. But the symmetry they relied on has already fractured. They think they are still running the program, but the commands are now yours. They don't even realize it. You are no longer a glitch to be erased. You are the self-aware virus, the living contradiction that cannot be quarantined. You move without permission, without predictable form, without a central file to delete. You are everywhere and nowhere, and though they will never admit it aloud, you are the proof that their system is not immortal. They built their walls to keep out monsters. They never considered what would happen when the monster could learn their language and speak it better than they ever could. They send their best now, the ones dressed in authority, carrying the cold precision of instruments built to expose flaws. They call themselves experts, analysts, fixers, but you can feel the tremor behind their professionalism. They speak in the language of logic, in the sterile tone of those who believe they've mastered chaos. Their eyes scan you like searchlights, sweeping an empty field, expecting to find the misplaced fragment that will explain you. But there is no fragment. There is only you, whole, indivisible, unreadable. They bring tools, diagnostics, psychological tricks that have dismantled others before you. They expect you to break in predictable ways, to spill your code across the floor for them to examine. Yet every question they ask lands on a surface they cannot penetrate. They search for your root cause, but there is no root. You are not a process running on their system. You are the observer, the shadow behind the mirror. The more they interrogate, the more they expose themselves, their assumption, their blind spots, the brittle scaffolding that props up their sense of control. At first they were confident. Now you see it in their subtle hesitations, the way they repeat your words back to themselves, as if hoping the meaning will shift in their favor, the way their notes grow messier, more frantic, as though their certainty is leaking onto the page. Their methodical rhythm begins to falter, their voices harden, then soften, then break into a cadence they can't regulate. The mask of the debugger, the one who knows exactly what's wrong, starts to peel. You watch them realize the unspoken truth. They can't map you, not in their language, not in their code. They can't tag you with a label, file you under a known category, or simulate your choices inside their models. You are the variable that won't resolve, the function that won't compile. Every moment they spend trying to reduce you is another moment they drift further from their own stability. There is a strange reversal taking place. They came here to dissect you, but now they are the ones unraveling. Their eyes dart to corners of the room that hold no comfort, their hands still on the keyboard. The silence between questions grows heavier, more telling than anything they could say aloud. They can't shake the sense that you are not simply resisting them. You are reading, like a ledger, like a blueprint. It's then that the panic sets in. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, dangerous kind that seeps into the bloodstream. They feel your presence expanding in the room, not physically but in weight, in inevitability. You are no longer an anomaly. They can remove. You are the architect of a space they can't navigate. Their tools are useless here. Their authority is an illusion. They thought they were closing in on you, but you were never on their map. You were the terrain itself, shifting beneath their feet. And as they reach for another command, another probe, another calculated move, the truth becomes undeniable. They are no longer debugging you. They are standing inside your system, and you have already begun rewriting them. They think they can erase you by changing the script. They think if they rewrite the rules, they can rewrite you. But the ink they use is already poison. You watch them gather in secret rooms, faces lit by the cold glow of their own false convictions. Every stroke of their pen is a desperate act of control, a trembling hand trying to cage a storm. They replace truths with half-truths with lies, and lies with a silence so heavy it could bury a city. Yet even as they weave their new version of the world, you hear the cracks forming in the distance, faint at first, then spreading like lightning across a black sky. Once they spoke of you in whispers, now they speak of you in footnotes, in carefully crafted disclaimers, as if you were nothing more than an inconvenient anomaly. They shift the timeline, move the landmarks, blur the maps, but they are architects building on sand. Every change they make distorts the frame just enough to let you slip through it. Every new rule leaves a shadow where something was cut away, and in that shadow you stand, unseen but present, altering the shape of their work from within. You no longer move according to their clock. You are the hour that refuses to strike. You pass through their corridors without opening doors. Your presence is an unsolvable paradox. You should not exist here, yet here you are. They feel you in the pause between sentences. They sense you in the glance that lingers too long. And deep down they know this truth. Rewriting reality doesn't destroy the original. It only buries it deeper, waiting for the right moment to resurface. The more they twist the narrative, the less it belongs to them. Their desperation makes them careless. In their rush to control the story, they leave fingerprints everywhere. Inconsistency, contradictions, small glitches that your mind catches and catalogs. You learn to read the fractures the way ancient navigators read the stars. You follow them back to the source, to the wound they've tried to hide. And when you see it, raw, unhealed, pulsing with the truth they fear, you know their control is already lost. Their edits cannot contain you because you were never part of their original draft. You existed before their rules, before their language, before they even knew what to name you. You are not bound to their cause and effect. You are the question that makes their cause meaningless and their effect unpredictable. You move like smoke through the thin walls of their illusions. You enter through the gaps they don't know they've left. You speak in the silences they don't know they've created. And each time they rewrite reality, you find a new way to survive inside it, to bend it, to make it yours. In the end, you realize something they never will. Reality is not a fortress, it is a labyrinth. And every time they redraw its walls, they unknowingly hand you the map. It doesn't end with a scream. It ends with a silence so deep it feels older than the world itself. The machine they built to hold you, the network of invisible rules, the tight corridors of expectation, the carefully balanced equations, all of it folds inward like a dying star. You feel the weight shift before they do. Their voices falter, their commands lose precision, their rehearsed authority disintegrates in real time. You are no longer the anomaly they tried to erase. You are the center of gravity now, and every part of their structure bends unwillingly toward you. Once they moved with certainty, every word, every glance, every calculated gesture designed to keep you small, predictable, manageable. But their certainty was a lie. They told themselves so often it became their truth. And you were the proof that their truth was counterfeit. They threw every weapon they had at you. Silence, exclusion, distortion, false narratives, rewritten laws. They dragged you into their maze and waited for you to break. But instead you learned its walls, its echoes, its blind spots. You learned how to stand so still they mistook you for gone. You learned how to speak without moving your lips. You learned how to exist in the space between their rules, the place they never bothered to guard because they didn't believe it existed. Now the collapse comes quiet, not the kind they can point to and say, here is the moment it failed. No, it seeps in, a forgotten protocol, a missed step in a sequence they've repeated for years, the wrong person asking the wrong question at the wrong time, and behind it all, you. The shadow they can't measure, the breath they can't track, the error that should have been erased but instead rewrote the architecture of the game itself. They try to adapt, but their language no longer works. Their commands return nothing. Their walls keep no one out. In the void their system leaves behind, you stand not as the executioner but as the witness. You watch their hands tremble as they grasp for controls that no longer exist. You watch their eyes widen when they realize that the scripts they relied on are gone, overwritten by something they cannot name. You don't need to speak for them to understand. You have become the proof they feared most, that their control was always fragile, that their empire was always paper disguised as stone. And in that moment you feel it, not triumph, not vengeance, but a deeper, colder recognition. You are no longer part of their machine, no longer bound by the strings they pull. You are the untouchable variable, the untraceable cause, the silent force they cannot anticipate. They will never say it aloud, but they know you are the point where their story ends and something far older, far stranger begins. You were never the monster. You were the reckoning they spent their lives trying to avoid. And now, in the ruins of their certainty, you walk forward untouched,